It was July of 2018 when I got the call that my middle son had completed suicide. And so I had to figure out, well, then what does it mean to move forward? How do we honor Jeremy? How do we continue to live? What does life look like? And I thought, well, the stages of grief, that's just a checklist. I'm just going to bang that thing out. I'm going to get through the denial, the bargaining, the anger, the depression, and then get to acceptance and be able to keep going. And I found out that grief doesn't work that way.
You know, I think right now would be a perfect time to share that this podcast is officially sponsored. And this week's episode is brought to you by Juliana Barbati Consulting. Juliana is an expert in podcast SEO. She's worked with so many different podcasts and helped shows grow, helped shows get more eyes, helped shows get more ears, helped shows, get more followers. And I am honored to be working with her and have her team backing the podcast. So I'm very excited that they are the first advertiser to join the Round 2 podcast, first of many. So thank you, Juliana. And if you are looking for any sort of services to help your podcast grow, feel free to reach out to her. Her contact information is in the show notes.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Round 2 podcast. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and I have a guest with me today who is coming from the great state of Minnesota, Tara Karels. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you today, Nikki?
I'm fantastic. It's so nice to have you on.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And we're actually now finally into our spring season here in Minnesota, so that trees are starting to green up and the lawns are greening up and we're not freezing to death. So I think it's a win.
Oh my God, I love hearing that. I think I might have mentioned to you last time we spoke that I have another connection in your state, and he was telling me one day that the temperature was -17, and I was like, that just doesn't even compute in my brain.
Of course not. And why would it? I mean, it really should not be something we've ever heard of or experienced.
Yeah, I remember saying like, well, what does it look like outside? And he was like, the sun's out. And I'm like, but it's that cold? Like how? Crazy.
Much further away from Minnesota than any other part of the world, I'm sure. The sun is just way out there.
It must be wild. Well, I'm so excited to talk with you and to learn about you, because we did get connected from one of my prior podcast guests, Eric, who is just an absolute gem of a human. And so when he said, you need to meet my friend Tara, I said, yes, please.
Yeah. And I was just grateful for the connection. Eric is a great guy with a great story. So, so great that you had him on. And I listened to that podcast and it was wonderful.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I told him, I said, this was probably the easiest interview I've ever done, because I felt like he was on specifically to just speak to me and teach me all of his wisdom. And I was like, this was the greatest hour I've ever spent. Thanks.
Well, I don't know if I can be that wise. Those are some big shoes to fill.
Oh my gosh. Well, everybody has a unique story to share. And so I'm very much looking forward to hearing yours. So why don't you tell me a little bit about you from wherever you feel called to start?
Well, I am originally from here, the great state of Minnesota. I have not traveled far away for any length of time. Grew up in central Minnesota, and now I reside in the Minneapolis area. I've been a registered nurse for 31 years, so happy Nurses Week. I realize we're recording now and this will come out later, but I still want to give a shout out to the great profession.
Yes, wonderful. I have some friends who are nurses, and that's a tough job. So thank you for your long-term career there.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I've spent majority of my career in women's health, primarily labor and delivery and postpartum. So I get to see the beauty of life as it comes into the world day after day, working in the busiest birth center in the state of Minnesota.
Oh my gosh.
And then part of that work, people always say we work in Disneyland, and it kind of is, except that when it's not, it's really, really bad. And I am honored to be able to also serve on our bereavement team. So I do care for families that are going through a loss as well. So on the other side of things that we don't like to talk about or think about. So been a great career. I've had lots of different opportunities over the years and have kind of made a shift as I'm seeing my career will sunset for me from the hospital bedside into doing more speaking and coaching and consulting. And I just completed my first book. So that's kind of been a transition for me over the past few years and something I'm very passionate about, kind of a new mission in life. I'm still caring for people, but just in a different way.
Yeah. Well, that's really neat. So, what has made you want to make the shift into speaking and even to write a book?
Well, I've always wanted to write a book. Ever since
Okay.
I was little, I would write all the time. I loved it. So writing is something that was just part of me all the while I grew up. And I think a lot of us dream of writing a book. So it was always in the back of my mind and something I wanted to pursue in life at some point. And then the speaking piece and coaching piece, I started teaching childbirth classes in 1998. And I developed a program for the hospital I was at and teaching childbirth preparation, newborn care, and a sibling class and a mom support group. And I found this love for being in front of the classroom and teaching and speaking and being mostly an introvert. It's funny because if you give me a microphone and a stage, I'm on fire.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, but if you plunk me in a room full of strangers, they're just all mingling, I will likely try to find an hors d'oeuvre tray and just walk around and serve people because I don't want to make small talk.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. Small talk can be tiring.
But yeah, so I've kind of had those passions all along. And I started working on my memoirs in probably my 30s, started writing some of my past and what I'd gone through, some different experiences. Like you said, we all have a story. And I really wanted the things I'd gone through in life to help other people because I thought if I could share my story and some of the things I've been through, maybe it would speak to someone who could get through something difficult.
Hmm.
So that was always on my heart.
I love that.
And I think, that's just part of who I am, being a nurse and being a caregiver. So I was fleshing those out. I basically had a 3-volume series of my memoirs, and the first one was kind of coming together. And then life threw me a curveball. And so it changed the trajectory of everything. And in 2018, I had raised my 3 kids. My youngest was a senior in high school. My oldest was done with college. She was actually living down here in the Twin Cities, and I was still up in central Minnesota. And my middle son was in college. And it was July of 2018 when I got the call that my middle son had completed suicide.
Oh my gosh. I'm
At
so
the
sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
So at the age of 19, we lost Jeremy. And my kids were 18 months apart, each one of them. So it was a huge change to everything we'd ever known. And I fell into a tremendous grief,
I can imagine.
trying to figure out how to navigate that. And, it's something you don't move on from.
Yeah, I don't know how you could.
And so I had to figure out, well, then what does it mean to move forward? How do we honor Jeremy? How do we continue to live? What does life look like? Because at the time, and still today, but I was single. The kids' dad and I were divorced many years before. And so I had to walk that journey alone, which was extremely difficult, but it really forced me to look at how I was going to navigate the pain, how I was going to pick myself up, and what tools I needed to do that. And
Yeah.
so my memoirs went in the garbage because I felt like it didn't matter anymore. This was so much bigger. And then I started picking up the pieces and figuring out that a lot of the tools I'd used throughout my life to get through difficult things were the same ones I needed to get through the loss of Jeremy.
Wow. What an interesting realization.
Yeah, I mean, at first, and I write about this in my book, that I thought the stages of grief, because I'd learned about the stages of grief, like most of us do, but I had more study in it with nursing school. And I thought, well, the stages of grief, that's just a checklist. I'm
Oh,
just going to
interesting.
bang that thing out. I'm going
Uh-huh.
to get through the denial, the bargaining, the anger, the depression, and then get to acceptance and be able to keep going. And I found out that grief doesn't work that way. And the stages of grief were actually written for people who were preparing for death, people who knew they had a terminal
Oh.
diagnosis.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it
Okay.
isn't some kind of pathway for
Mm-hmm.
someone who's left behind.
Yeah.
And grief moves in and out, as many people have experienced in their own lives when they've
Mm-hmm.
lost someone. And so I had to rethink that. And then I had to figure out, so what are those tools to move forward? Because grief isn't going to go away. It's something you continue to carry,
Yeah.
but you have to figure out how to do that.
Wow. Well, I'm so sorry about your loss. That just, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and thank you. I will tell people I hope you never do. It is not something that you want anyone to have to experience or go through, and certainly not something you want to ever see happen to another family.
I don't even know what an appropriate question would be as far as was he struggling with his mental health? Were there things going on in his life that you were concerned about?
Honestly, no. In fact, of my 3 children, he was the last one I thought would ever really have an issue, which I think is a good lesson for people because
Yeah.
it's often those we think that are steady in the storm, that are okay, that maybe aren't sharing what's really under the surface. And such a weird situation. But before he passed, before we went through any of this, I had done some research and looked at why we were losing so many young men to suicide and what was it. And having had a girl and 2 boys, I knew there's often a big difference between how girls and boys handle things as they grow up. And girls are often very vocal. We'll describe them as whiny or emotional.
uh-huh.
And I think that that's very acceptable for young girls and for teenage girls. And some will argue that we as women, our entire lives are that way. But I think that that's probably a healthy way that we express our emotions and get through things. And boys tend to be more stoic, or we're not as accepting of them expressing themselves. And so maybe we're missing something. And I remember looking into that a lot and then being the parent that went through that with my son. So um, I think the hardest thing for me as a mom was knowing that my son had this moment of such great hopelessness that he made the choice he did. And it's so painful because as a parent, I mean, if our child falls and skins their knee, we want to kiss it and make it better and bandage it up. And then when they have their first, breakup or heartbreak, we want to heal that and fix that and help them. Um, and we do our best to always do that for our children. And then when they make a choice that is irreversible, and we can never kiss that better. So that was a hard one for me to be even able to talk about for a long
I
time.
That is the thing that is so devastating about when somebody takes their own life, because you just sit and you wonder, what were those thoughts? What consumed them? Why were they unable to pick up the phone and just call anyone? Because you know that as human beings, if anybody called you, even as someone you hardly knew, and said, "Hey, I'm about to just end it all," you would do everything in your power to talk them out of it. And it's so sad knowing that there are so many people that loved him and that would have helped him and sat up for hours and talked to him, or got in the car and driven to where he was, or got on a plane to do whatever they could to just be there for him to work through those dark moments.
Yes, and I think the more we can continue to talk about it and make it okay to struggle and to go through things.
Yeah.
And May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really significant for me to have this book launch on April 22nd and now be hosting launch parties and getting my book
Cool.
out there at a time that is significant for the mental health community. And also, just really, to me, the book is something that is for the masses. It is a
Mm-hmm.
way that someone's life could be changed by reading the book, by hearing a message that helps them to navigate through adversity. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what matters to me now, is that we're continuing to talk about things and spread some hope.
Yeah. I think what's so great about the time that we're currently living in is that there's so much more openness to having discussions on topics that have traditionally been either more just things that people would tiptoe around, things that were considered taboo, things that were considered just so unfathomable that you don't know what to say. I mean, even now, you think about when somebody loses a parent to simply old age, it still is like hard to be like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, or "Oh, I don't want to call because I don't know what to say," when it's as simple as the circle of life, right? And then in a case like this, it's even harder to know what to say because it's, thankfully for a lot of people, it's so far out of their realm of comprehension that they cannot relate at all. But you still, as human beings, we still need that support and that love and those people to call us and say, just simply say, hey, I'm so sorry. How can I be there for you? Or can I buy you a cup of coffee? Can I come over and give you a hug?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on because, 2025, we struggle with talking about death or being comfortable with being around people that are grieving. And it's a very real thing. It's very difficult to know what to say or be worried about that. And I can tell you from my experience that just I'm sorry, or I'm here, or I'm thinking of you, those simple words, those simple gestures are really enough, but they're very meaningful. And
Yeah.
part of my story is that I had raised my kids in central Minnesota. That's where I had grown up, gone to college a few places, moved around, and then settled there to raise our family. And I ended up leaving there about 3 years after Jeremy passed, because being a smaller community and being somewhere I'd been for much of my life, it was very difficult to go through the grief and then try to move forward, because you have a larger reach when you live in a smaller community. So it's hard to go to the grocery store and not run into someone you know. And I would come around a corner and I could just watch someone's face drop when they saw me, because they felt pain seeing me, which is a normal human response. When we see someone who's gone through something, it feels heavy. But I didn't want to bring out that in people day in and day
Yeah.
out. And I wanted to be able to look at someone when they said, "How are you?" I wanted to be able to say, "Fabulous,"
Uh-huh.
and have them believe me, even if I didn't believe it yet.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that in my small community because it was difficult for people. They would say, "No, really, how are you?" And it was out of care, but it was like, "Can you just let me pretend I'm fabulous today?" So I ended up making a move, and it's very interesting because you talk about this rebuilding yourself this second time around. And it was like, here I was, 50 years old, and I moved to Minneapolis by myself and started a brand new job with a whole bunch of, young nurses, and really just recreated myself because I needed a little bit of space to
Mhm.
become who I was going to be after Jeremy.
I mean, that's really brave of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot of sayings about we do hard things when we're forced to, or, and so I'm really pleased with that decision. I'm actually having a launch party up in central Minnesota at the end of this month to celebrate and to bring my book to people and see people I haven't seen in a number of years, and just say thank you for their support walking along this journey with me, because I don't want them to feel like I ran away.
Yeah.
It was a better decision for me to be able to continue to move forward.
Well, I mean, and talking about mental health, you were doing what you needed to do for your grieving journey, but also your personal life journey. And, I mean, like I said, I do think that that's a really brave decision and it's a really self aware decision because I bet a lot of people would have just stayed and stayed stuck. And I feel like even though it's nothing to do with moving forward from a forgetting perspective,
Right.
but it's a moving forward to, say, okay, like you said, like, what does life look like now? What is the life I'm going to be living now that he's no longer with me?
Yeah. And the book is not a big long story about me. It's very interesting. I really thought I was supposed to write my memoir, like I mentioned
Uh-huh.
earlier.
Yeah.
And it is clear to me that this is really the book I was meant to write because it has one chapter really that talks about
Okay.
that piece of my story. But it also spends a lot of time talking about other overcomers in history,
Oh,
people
neat.
that we've all seen or heard of along the way, to kind of see different ways that people have built resilience and then gained momentum through storms. And it dispels some of the myths, about the stages of grief, that some people are just born with resilience. We're not. We build it, and it's like a muscle, and it takes time. And then I built a framework that utilizes those tools to help you get back into momentum. And to me, that's really that gift I want to give back to people is not here's a story about me, but here is a framework that can help you or can help your friend, that can help someone move forward who feels stuck, because it doesn't have to be a tremendous loss. It doesn't have to be the death of someone we love or a suicide. It can be the loss of a job. It can be the loss of a relationship. It can just be a dark season in our life that we're going
Yeah.
through. And it's so easy to get stuck in our world where everything's going quickly and we're constantly seeing flashes through life and social media and all the things of all these people that are achieving and happy and things are great. And if we're going through something challenging, we can feel very alone. And so, how can we help one another to get that momentum back? And so, that is really my mission with the book. And then, with the book, I built a course that can be done asynchronously for people on their own, online, to take that framework a step further and really apply it to their own life and reflect on how are they going to build that resilience.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, that's really my mission is I want to help people to gain that momentum. And so the book and the course are meant for that. And then some of the work I do with speaking is just taking it to the next level. It's finding those people who are looking at how do we improve retention in our business? How do we connect our employees with the company mission and alignment and really make people feel part of a team? Well, we start with helping them through their own adversity and giving them some strength on their own. And through that, they're better able to show up
Yeah.
because they're in a better place. So it's just been so exciting for me to see this evolve into something that can make a difference.
Yeah.
And life is always going to be different without Jeremy, but
Yeah.
I can honor him and his life by moving forward, and I can be engaged and part of my other adult children's lives in a healthy and loving way as a mom on this side of it than
Yeah.
in the depths of it.
So, how did your other kids work through their grief?
They're still working through it. It was really difficult. My daughter, she is married and they don't have any kids yet, although I do have granddogs and grandcats. And
Uh-huh.
um, she's expressed a lot of different emotions along the way. She's the one that likes to buy things that remind us of Jeremy and make sure we always tell stories. So we try to make sure that's part of our language and the things we do. My son, who was the youngest and Jeremy was in the middle, my living son, he was 18. He had just graduated high school when Jeremy passed. And so it did change the trajectory of his life because he ended up not being sure about his future and about college and kind of just checked out for a while.
Uh-huh.
And I allowed him to do that. I mean, he
Yeah.
needed to feel what he was going through and kind of work through all of those emotions. And for me, there was something about losing Jeremy that it became very real. I think we worry when we have children, like they get their driver's license and, oh my gosh, they could get in an accident or something could happen to them. But until I lost Jeremy, I never thought one of my children would die. Like I never thought that they could really just die. And once Jeremy was gone, it was like there was this reality that I could never live through losing another one. And so I really was careful to watch what they needed. I was really nervous in those first months following, especially because you just don't know how they're going to process that. And statistically, survivors of suicide have a greater risk of suicide following the
Really?
loss. And so yeah, it's been a journey. And I read some articles. One of the articles I read was phenomenal, and it talked about, and I wish I could quote the author, but it talked about how losing a sibling is like losing a limb. It's like losing your arm or your leg because they've been so much a part of your life. And
Yeah.
so I've had to kind of step back and recognize that they have a grieving process too that is very different than mine, but very real.
Gosh, do you feel like it's made the three of you closer as a family?
I think we always had a good relationship, but it's definitely changed things. I mean, it's forced us to talk about things we didn't think we'd have to talk about. And I check in more often and address things differently, but they're doing well. I mean, they're in a place now that's much better. I think that they have grown through it as well. And that's really was my hope for that because like I said, we're all going to be different on this side, but we need to find a way to be strong.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like grief is so individual, right? Like everybody manages through it differently. Everybody reacts differently, whether it's how they live or speak or communicate or turn inwards or whatnot. So, but I do think that that's really interesting to hear you say how, you approach things differently and you communicate differently because I think that is really important. I mean, it's important to acknowledge and become aware of all of the different parts of life that this touches, right? It's not just one person who is no longer there, it affects every aspect of your world.
Yeah. And when I speak to groups, a lot of times I will call out and do a comparison and say, so if we have a person who just had a fall during a basketball game and they tore up their knee and now they're going to have to have surgery and they're going to be out for 3 months. And then we have someone who just lost their dog. And then we have someone whose mother just passed away, whose grief is the worst. And the reality is that no one's is worse than another's because it's in the moment of grief.
Yeah.
It is heavy. We don't have to compare. We don't have to say, well, I'm hurting more because of this. And I've had people over the years now say to me, well, I have no idea what yours is like. I mean, mine was nothing like yours. And I'm like, no, yours was because yours was very painful for you in the moment. And you had to walk through that and you had to figure out how to move forward. And so it really isn't different. And so I really want to acknowledge that we do have moments that are very grievous, and there is no scale to say whose is worse
Right,
than
right.
another.
I think that's number one, it's very true, but I also think that it's very, again, going back to calling you self aware, it's very a self aware statement for you to be able to say that because I think it would also be very easy for you to be like, no, mine's the worst. Like you have an experience, like you lost your dog. Well, I lost my son, you know? I mean, I think that that would be like, and in a lot of cases, I think a lot of people would be like, totally fair. You're right. That it's not as, but when you're saying like, hey, in the moment, you were experiencing this massive loss and you're dealing with it and you had to deal with it. So there's no like greater than, less than. It's your story.
Yeah. There were definitely times where I was in the depths of that darkness. And if you'd have come up and said, but I lost my dog, I might not have responded as well as I do today.
Sure, sure.
But I acknowledge it today because I think we have to be okay with other people's grief and it doesn't have to be a competition. And I also, one of the steps of my framework is about choosing to get well, choosing to not be
Yes.
in that victim place
Mm-hmm.
and to have that courage to move forward.
See, I love that you said that, because I think that kind of goes back to what I said earlier about being stuck, right? It's choosing to move forward, or choose. I mean, it's always a choice, right? Well, I was with a friend over the weekend and she said, "This is my mantra for the rest of the year." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "What you're not changing, you're choosing." And I was like, "Oh, I've heard that before." And I really, really love that. And it is so true. It's like, if you are constantly sitting in the dark and sad and being victimized by your circumstances, you are choosing that by not changing it. And, you had the self awareness to say, "Okay, I'm going to change not only my mindset with how I'm working through my grief, but I'm also going to change my physical location. I'm going to change this book that I'm writing. I'm going to change my career path. I'm going to change all of these things." And I think that's really neat.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's a journey, but like we started this out, everyone has a story and
Absolutely.
people are fascinating. And when we learn more about others and what they've been through and what they've experienced, we can have such an appreciation for one another and the strength that we have and the resilience we've built because of what we've gone through. And I think it's important to share those things because sometimes we need to remind ourselves that we're strong, and we also need to remind one another.
Definitely. And I think by sharing our experiences with all different aspects of life, it's so easy to say, "Oh, well, if that were me, I would do X." And it's like, you truly never know what you will do in a situation until you're in that situation yourself. And so I think by continuing to share stories of people who have overcome different things, who have been in situations, whether they chose to put themselves through a life change or whether something unexpected happened, sharing those stories so other people can hear that there are so many different ways that people respond to life, and that you truly won't know how you will respond to life until you're in that situation yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just reminds us that we can't make a choice for another person and we can't judge a person based on what we see their choice to be because we're
Yeah.
not living that for them.
So I have a question about the book, and going back to you saying that you wanted to be an author from a young age. Now, for some reason for me, and tell me if this is the same for you, I always feel like when someone says like write a book, I don't know if I'm just romanticizing it or if it just sounds like so like, ooh, like I wrote a book and just kind of like fancy and oh, this is so neat. Now, I've not written a book. It is on my list of things to do. So tell me the real story. Like, how was the experience?
Oh, the real experience was that I thought I was just going to bang this book out in a number of months. And I got stuck in places. The queen of getting people unstuck. I got stuck in places because it became very emotional,
Oh,
thinking
I
about
bet.
how do I share this in a way that honors the people in my life. And although it's only one chapter in the whole book that really calls out my experience and the story, I really wanted to honor the people that were in that story. And I did not ever want to look over my shoulder and go, I wonder if so and so will read it and not like what I wrote. Because I truly wanted it to be a very pure, this is the story. And I also didn't want it to be a triggering story for people who've gone through some deep things. So that became really a hill for me to climb and get through, was figuring out how to do that piece. The framework was easier because I had been living it. And so and then just doing the research, finding some really interesting people throughout history and being able to tie in where they applied the framework pieces that I created. And it was really fun then too, because learning about different people that I knew little bits and pieces about and reading some different books. But then, interestingly enough, I had a knee replacement surgery. And I know it
Okay.
seems crazy that someone as young as 30 would have to have one of those. Just
Really?
kidding.
Oh, I was like, wait, at 30 you had a knee replacement? I was like, what kind of
No,
sports did you play?
13 weeks ago I had one. So
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
so no,
How's that been?
awesome.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was best decision ever. So I had
okay.
surgery in January. So for 2 weeks, you're kind of just surviving. You're hoping you don't die and that your knee will actually feel better someday. And then it gets much better very quickly. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is like good. And I had 12 weeks off from my nursing job. And I was like, well, time to get busy. And so I
Okay.
finished the book.
Oh, awesome. Good for you.
And, once I got clipping and I got through figuring out that chapter about my story, it went very smooth. And then I finished the book. I sent a PDF of it to one of the copy stores and went and picked up my spiral bound book to look at it and do some more edits. And it was just surreal. And then I sent it to an editor and formatter.
Uh-huh.
And that was really weird because I'd been so immersed in it for so many weeks and for so many hours a day because I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to PT and I was rehabbing my knee. And all of a sudden it was gone. It was at the editor and it was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. And it's really a neat thing to get to those steps where you send it to the editor and then you get a proof copy and you start looking at that. And then all of a sudden it's for sale. It's there. You go on Amazon and there's your book and you're like, oh my gosh. And then people start buying it and sending you pictures of them holding your book.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it's really been fun and exciting and fun to see it happen. I mean, to come to fruition after all these years. And now I'm ready to write book number 2. So
awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. Now, what is the name of it? It's Trekking Poles, right?
Yes. So here it is. Is it backwards?
Nope, it's forwards.
Okay. So the book is called Trekking Poles, and this top part says The Essential Guide to Thriving Through Adversity. So that's how you're going to find it on Amazon. And then it has just a subtitle, but beautiful little watercolor on the front.
Yeah, I love that.
Go on the back, and not a big, scary book. When you talk about, like, have you ever like gotten a book and you're so excited and it comes and you're like,
it's
that
huge.
is the biggest book I've ever seen.
Yes,
and
yes.
I'm afraid of it.
Yes.
So mine is not intimidating.
Okay.
And Trekking Poles, the name of the book.
Okay, yeah, you took the question right out of my mouth. How did you name it?
So it was probably not the brightest idea to name it that, because if you search trekking poles on Amazon, you could end up with a set of trekking poles or a book on hiking.
Yeah.
When I first launched it, I sold Kindle downloads in Japan, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom.
All the hiking places?
And I
joked, all the people that want to hike?
Yeah, I joked that they all accidentally purchased it and downloaded it because they were going on a trip and didn't realize what they were getting. But
oh my gosh, that's fun. Well, it's so funny to me because I've been to a lot of those places and I always meet people who live there. And then whenever they ask, oh, where in America are you from? And then I tell them, and then they talk about their trips to America, and they're all to visit our national parks. And I then feel like the ignorant American who's been to like one of our national parks. And they're like, what do you mean? They're so amazing. That's the best reason to come to the US. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I should check it out.
You mean they don't come for Disneyland or the Mall of America?
I know, right? I'm like, what are you talking about?
So trekking poles came from what they're used for. And trekking poles are used with hiking. They can be used obviously with hiking in the mountains, things like that. That's what people think of, but they also can be used with snowshoeing. We use them with skiing, different things. But really the purpose of trekking poles is for stability. And it's to help you to go faster on your climb. It's to give you some support if the ground is uneven. So I started thinking about that whole definition, and I put it in the book so people aren't like, why is this the name? But really talks about, if that's what trekking poles are for, then what are your trekking poles that are going to help you navigate life? What are those things that keep you steady, help you to ascend faster and to get through places that aren't stable.
Okay, cool.
So then my framework is named the POLES framework, using the letters from the word poles to talk about those steps to moving forward through adversity.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love it. So now, are you someone who does like actively use trekking poles when you're out walking or hiking or
I
anything?
do. And
Okay.
it's not like we have mountains in Minnesota. We do
Yeah.
not.
We have snow.
We do. And
Yeah.
I snowshoe, and I do use
Okay.
them for snowshoeing, but also just for hiking. And then when my knee was getting bad over the last couple of years, I was using them when I just go for a walk because of the support, because of my knee being weaker. And so I like to say that came up with the name because I'm getting old and my body was falling apart.
Well, now you're like part bionic, right? With this new
Yes,
knee. That's amazing.
exactly. I think I can leap tall buildings. But
I love it.
so then the other thing I just wanted to share is that the Climber's Companion is the workbook that goes with my online course. And the course is 6 modules that take you through that framework in, just like I said, a very personal way where you can reflect and do worksheets and journaling through how am I getting through something that I'm going through, or if I'm feeling stuck. This is kind of to help you move ahead. And so the workbook, the course are not available on Amazon like the book. They are actually available through my website separately. And that is trekkingpoles.co. And so that's where you also would find a link to the book if you're frustrated because you're ending up with
Only
hiking books.
with hiking, with all things hiking. We have all these professional hikers out in the world now who just wanted to buy your book and now they have all the gear. They're like, well, I guess I better turn into a hiker.
Right. Bestseller status for hiking books.
Yeah.
I
That's
did actually
great.
achieve bestseller status in 2 of my 3 Kindle categories in the very first week.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that is really wild too when you see that because of the number of books that are out there. And so that was fun to see that happen and just know that it was
Yeah.
getting in the hands of people.
So were you marketing it a certain way that you feel like you really were getting it out there, or how does
Well,
that work?
I had a launch member group, so ahead of time people could sign up to get emails and updates as I was writing the book. And so I had a following of people. And then I was sharing through my personal Facebook and social media about the book coming together. And then this launch group was helping me, like, okay, they're going to buy the book the first week. They're going to share with their friends. They'll write reviews, things like that. So I did some of that. And then, of course, I did a Kindle promotion. Kindle allows you to do 5 free days where your book is downloaded for free. And so I decided to just use those right away because I knew that the momentum of the book would come right out of the gate. You know, when you're not a best-selling author through the New York Times and those things, you're not going to have out of the gate sales that last.
Got it. Okay.
You know, it'll be kind of an ebb and flow now based on how I'm getting the word out when I'm doing speaking, when I'm on podcasts, things like that, that will, you know, generate some energy for the book. But initially I thought, if the energy's there, how can I get it in as many people's hands as I can? Because really the mission of the book is to help people. And so now for $15, hopefully that will be something that can change people's lives. And the Kindle is only $2.99, so it's not super expensive. Yeah. And I think that that's a way to help more people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, gosh, this has been such a beautiful conversation learning about your journey.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's not the life I planned. Most of the time, our life isn't the way we planned. We
Yeah.
have surprises, and some of them are beautiful, amazing, wonderful surprises, and some are painful. But I think that we just have to keep going and look for ways to continue to connect and honor the path that we're on.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Jeremy's very proud of you.
I hope so. He was a beautiful boy, and he brought a lot. In his 19 years, he impacted a lot of people and had a wonderful heart. So I'm glad that I can honor him.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. And I will put your website in the show notes so everybody can find the proper book and not a bunch of hiking gear, and, check in and learn from you, and hopefully, inspire some people to move through whatever is keeping them stuck in their life. So thank you again, Tara, for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki. And you'll have to shoot me an email with your contact stuff so I can send you a book.
Thank you. I would love that. And for everybody who has been listening and watching, thank you so much for being here. As always, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, all the great things. Let me know what you think. I love hearing from you. And we will talk to you next week. Bye.